Hi everyone, my name is Marcus and I'm an immigration attorney. Welcome back to our O1 Visa series. Actually, today we're sort of doing like a mini series. We're going to look at the evidentiary criteria in depth. We're going to go through every single one of them for every single video. So for this video, we are going through the very first criteria, which is evidentiary criteria number 1, performed and will perform services as a lead or starring participant in productions or events which have a distinguished reputation as evidenced by critical reviews, advertisements, publicity releases, publications, contracts, or endorsements. The key words here are performed and will perform, lead or starring, productions which have a distinguished reputation. So as you can see that there are 3 parts to this criteria and we're going to go through all 3 of them now. So for the very first part of the criteria, it says performed or will perform. So this is like a durational thing. So the question is, have you done it in the past and are you going to be doing it in the future? And I mean performing as a lead role in a production that's distinguished. We'll get to the other 2 in a minute, but let's just talk about performed and will perform in the future. So perform means that you've done it in the past. So that means that it's probably on your resume, it's probably already on your portfolio. So that should be pretty easy to document already. The question is, what about in the future? So will perform in the future. Usually immigration, the first thing they're going to look at is the contract. So remember the contracts, you need basically contracts to show that you're going to be working in the United States for the next 3 years. Well, immigration is going to take a really hard look at those contracts to see like if the future productions that you're going to be in, are they going to be where you are going to be a lead role, and whether these productions are going to be distinguished. So things that they look out for is, does it specifically say lead role, or what exactly you're going to be doing in this production. Also, venue. So when it comes to like where you're going to be performing at, or like which company you're going to be working for, they want to know like, is this a distinguished company? Is this a distinguished venue? If it's a venue, like how many seats are there? If it's a really, really tiny venue, it's more likely that immigration is not going to find that the contract shows that the production is going to be distinguished in the future. Obviously, the larger the contracts, the better. Just be really careful in terms of like making up your contracts. You don't want to lie to immigration. So if you think like, putting down like I'm going to be in this HBO series is going to be really, really great for you, just be very, very aware that immigration has access to IMDb and Google as well. So they can definitely, Google Netflix, Google IMDb, and kind of see if you actually are in these productions or not. So I actually had a case that came to me and the person lied on their contract and basically said that they were going to be on like this Netflix series. And surprisingly, they got an RFE, and the officer basically said, I watched the show and you were not in the show and you basically lied. So don't lie to immigration just because you want to fulfill this part of the criteria. So the second part of the criteria has to do with your role in the production. So the role in this case can only be lead or starring. So that means that anything that's like ensemble, or if you're like one of like many hundreds of people, generally it doesn't count. So what exactly is a lead or starring role? So usually my example is, okay, let's say the play Romeo and Juliet. So if you're Romeo or you're Juliet, you're probably the lead. If you are like Mercutio or maybe the nurse, you can say that, okay, you're starring or something like that. But if you're just like random village people or like random like Verona person, then most likely you're not going to be able to meet this criteria because you either have to be lead or starring. When it comes to this criteria, it's a little bit harder when it comes to like contemporary work sometimes, because sometimes it's like 4 people on stage and it's really difficult to say like, well, who exactly is the lead, because all 4 of them are like on stage all the time. Like I think of like the play Art, where it's basically 3 friends and they're just talking on stage, and the question is like, well, who's the lead? So when it comes to that kind of thing, you want to get documentation from maybe the producer or the director in the form of like a testimonial or something like that that says that you are lead or starring, and sort of like clarify what exactly your role is. Make it easy for immigration to know which box to tick in terms of whether or not you meet this criteria. Obviously you can't lie. Once again, you can't lie. So if you are an ensemble member, it's very difficult for you to qualify that you are a lead. So let's say you're on Broadway, which is great, but the thing is that you are like ensemble, or maybe you have like a dance solo. That's gonna be really, really difficult for you to say that you still play a lead role for the entire production. So for example, I don't know, let's say The Sound of Music or something like that. If you are just one of the ensemble or even one of the kids, it's a little bit difficult to say that you are a lead role. You might get away with starring, but it really depends on the documentation. If you are, random Nazi or something like that, then definitely not going to be able to make this part of the criteria. So for the third part of the criteria, it has to do with the production. Is this production considered distinguished or not? And the way you prove that the production is distinguished is by giving as much documentation as possible. And immigration has actually listed a couple of examples in terms of what they're looking for. So they're basically looking for things like critical reviews, advertisements, publicity releases, publications, contracts, and endorsements. So when it comes to reviews, they want to see reviews by like major media. So ideally, if it's like the New York Times or something like that, Ben Brantley says that your show, you are amazing, then okay, that totally helps you. In terms of ads, obviously more the better. Sometimes you have the same publicity release that's sort of like dumped all over the internet. That's perfectly fine if you sort of want to explain that like there's a lot of media around this kind of thing, but generally if it's the same thing that's being sent out there over and over and over again, it tends to like lose its effect a little bit. So ideally, reviews are great. Definitely invite lots of people to come see your show. Definitely get like an interview or something like that if that's possible. That would definitely help show that the production is considered distinguished, as well as the other criteria where you are like the lead or something like that. Another great thing would be like contracts or endorsements. Careful about the contracts though. You got to make sure that the contract shows that the show is going to be distinguished, because you can't just give a contract and it's just some random show in a basement somewhere. Then you basically just shot yourself in the foot because you told immigration like, hey, my show is not that distinguished. Endorsements are great, especially like if you're thinking in terms of like corporate sponsorship. If you get endorsements from, I don't know, let's say the government or something, sometimes you get like a government grant. That is stuff that you want to highlight in your application as well. Sometimes on the program right at the bottom it'll say like special thanks to their corporate sponsors or like the ministry or something like that. So stuff like that, you want to capture that. You want to take that information, put it in the cover letter, as well as submit that information to immigration in order to prove that your documentation is great, that the production is considered distinguished, and then therefore you meet all criteria. So the thing is that you need to be able to meet all three of these criteria. So performed and will perform, you've done it in the past, you're going to do it in the future, and then what is your role? It's either lead or starring, and you have to prove that the production is distinguished. So you need to move through all of them in order to fully hit this criteria. And you can't just give one, because the language of the actual criteria says productions. So presumably you have more than one. If you have 2 or 3, it's sort of like a weak case. For me, I prefer it if you had like at least 10 lead roles or something like that. I've definitely seen it happen with less. It's just that your chances of getting it tend to go down. So I would say like if you have like 10 lead solid productions and documentation that can actually prove that, you definitely have a better chance of getting the visa.